did not call back, not once. My son called 41 times over 2 days. My daughter-in-law sent 11 texts. My son's father-in-law even left a voicemail, which I thought was bold, considering I had never once received a birthday card from the man in 7 years. I sat on my back porch in Raleigh with a glass of sweet tea and watched the notifications stack up like unpaid bills, which, as it turned out, was exactly what they were about. Let me back up. My name is not important. What is important is that I am 63 years old. I worked 31 years in commercial real estate, and I raised my son alone after his mother passed when he was 11. I did not remarry. I did not date seriously. I poured everything I had, every Saturday, every holiday, every dollar I did not spend on myself, into that boy. I am not saying that to earn sympathy. I am saying it because it is the context for everything that follows. My son. I will call him my son, because that is what he is, and I still believe that even now. Married a woman named Kristen 4 years ago. Kristen is smart, organized, and deeply concerned with appearances. That is not an insult, it is an observation. She keeps a beautiful home. She plans things months in advance. She has opinions about font choices on holiday cards. I respected that about her, even when it exhausted me. Her parents, the Welses, live 40 minutes away in Cary. They retired early, which I never understood how, but that is their business. From the first year of the marriage, the Welses were woven into every holiday, every dinner, every Sunday. I was not excluded exactly. I was simply scheduled less conveniently. Thanksgiving with the Welses was always the main event. I was usually invited for the Saturday after, when the leftovers were already gone and my son was tired. I told myself it was fine. Young couples find their rhythm. I did not want to be the difficult father-in-law. I did not want to make my son feel pulled in 2 directions. So I stayed quiet, and I helped. When my son and Kristen decided they wanted to buy a house in Apex, a very nice house, 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, in a neighborhood where the HOA fees alone run $280 a month, I did not hesitate. The price was $487,000. Their combined income could manage the mortgage technically but barely and only if nothing went wrong. So I stepped in. I covered the down payment $97,000 because I did not want them to be house poor. And then, because the monthly payment was still tight, I agreed to send $1,400 every month to help cover it. Not a loan. A gift. Because he was my son and I wanted him to have a good life. I also kept them on my health insurance plan through my small business until the end of that year. I paid for the backyard fence they wanted for the dog. I sent money when the water heater failed. I did not keep a ledger. That is not the kind of father I wanted to be. Last November, my son called to talk about Christmas. I assumed we were finalizing plans. We had spent the previous Christmas at my house, just the 3 of us, low-key nice, and I had hoped we might do the same or something similar. I had already bought a standing rib roast. I was going to make my mother's recipe for the first time in years. He said Christmas this year was going to be at Kristen's parents' house. Just family, he said. I asked what that meant. He paused in a way that told me everything before he said anything. He said Kristen wanted it to be just her side this year. Intimate, he said. Kristen wanted it to be just her side this year. Intimate, he said. Her word, he told me, as if that softened it. I asked him directly, "Am I invited?" He said no. He said it quietly, and I could tell he felt bad, but he said it. He said Kristen felt like her family needed their own traditions and space, and this year was going to be just them. He said he hoped I understood. He said maybe we could do something the week after. I told him I needed to think. And I got in my car and I drove. I did not cry. I'm not saying that to sound tough. I'm saying I was too numb to cry. I'd just been told I was not part of the family Christmas. The man who paid for the house they were celebrating in, the man who had raised my son alone for 22 years, not invited, not family enough. I drove for 2 hours, ended up at a rest stop somewhere on I-40 and sat there watching trucks pull in and out. An old man walked past with a little beagle on a leash, and the dog looked up at me like it knew something was wrong. I almost laughed. When I got home, I did not call my son back. I sat at my kitchen table and I looked at my bank's bill pay screen on my laptop. The $400 transfer was scheduled for the 1st of December. 12 days away. I thought about it for a long time. I want to be honest about that. I did not make this decision in anger. I made it in clarity. There is a difference. Anger is hot and fast. What I felt that night was cold and slow and very, very clear. I canceled the transfer. Then I called my accountant the next morning, and we had a conversation I should have had 3 years earlier. I did not tell my son. I did not send a message explaining myself. I did not give a speech. I simply stopped, the way he had simply told me I was not welcome at Christmas. Simple. Clean. December 1st came and went. I spent it quietly. I went to my buddy Ray's house. I have known Ray since our boys were in Little League together, and we watched football and ordered wings, and it was genuinely a fine evening. I did not check my phone much. On December 3rd, my son called. I did not answer. He called again. I did not answer. He sent a text that said, "Hey Dad, just checking in, hope you're doing okay." I read it and set the phone down. On December 4th, he called 6 times. The text became more pointed. He said the mortgage payment hadn't come through, and he wasn't sure if there was a technical issue with the transfer. Technical issue. I almost smiled. On December 5th, my daughter-in-law texted me directly for the first time in 4 months. She asked if everything was okay. She said she noticed the payment hadn't posted. She used 3 exclamation points in a row, which told me she was not actually asking if I was okay. On December 6th, my son called 11 times in a single afternoon. I was at the grocery store picking up a few things for the week, and I watched my phone buzz in the cart like a trapped insect. I bought my groceries. I drove home. I put everything away. I made dinner. That evening, my son showed up at my door. I had not seen him in 6 weeks. He looked tired. He was wearing a coat I had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, which I noticed. He asked if he could come in. I said yes. We sat at the same kitchen table where I had made every decision about his life for 22 years. I made coffee because I did not know what else to do with my hands. He asked if the bank transfer had been a mistake. I said no. He asked if I was planning to send it. I said I had canceled the scheduled payment and I did not intend to restart it. He stared at me. He said, "Dad, the mortgage is due on the 15th. I said I knew. He asked what he was supposed to do. I told him that was a very important question, and I was glad he was asking it, and that the answer was probably to figure out how to pay his own mortgage, because that was generally what homeowners did. He got angry. I expected that. He said I was punishing him for Christmas. I said I was not punishing him. I was adjusting my financial commitments to reflect the nature of our relationship as he had defined it. He said that was not fair. I asked him what exactly he thought was fair about being uninvited from Christmas by the person whose mortgage I was paying. He did not have an answer for that. He said Kristen was going to be devastated. I said that Kristen was a capable adult with 2 working parents who owned a very nice house in Cary, and I had every confidence she would manage. He said I was being cold, and maybe I was, but I had been warm for a long time, and warmth had bought me a seat at the table every 3rd or 4th holiday when it was convenient, and then eventually not even that. He left after about 40 minutes. He did not slam the door, which I respected. He looked young walking down my driveway. He has always looked young to me. Even now. He was 11 when we lost his mother, and some part of me still sees him at that age, standing at the kitchen counter eating cereal before school, not knowing yet what the day would bring. I had to put that thought away. I was good at that by now. The next 2 weeks were the hardest, not because of anything dramatic, but because of the silence. He stopped calling as much. He was clearly dealing with the reality of the mortgage on his own. I do not know what conversations he and Kristen had. I do not know if she blamed him. I do not know what they told her parents. I did not ask. Christmas Eve, I sat in my living room and watched an old movie and went to bed at 10. It was the quietest Christmas Eve I could remember since my wife passed. Not in a bad way, exactly. Quiet, like an empty room you have finally stopped trying to fill. Christmas morning I drove to my brother's place in Greensboro. His wife made biscuits and his grandkids were everywhere and nobody asked me too many questions. It was enough. My son called on Christmas afternoon. I answered this time. He did not bring up the money. He just asked how I was doing. I said I was doing all right. He said he missed me. I said I knew. We talked for about 12 minutes about nothing in particular. A movie he had seen, something funny one of the neighbor's kids had done. And then we said, "Merry Christmas," and hung up. It was not a reconciliation. It was not a resolution. It was two people who love each other and have hurt each other, sitting with the hurt for a moment before moving on to something small. In January, my son and Kristen refinanced the mortgage and restructured their budget. I know this because he told me, not because I asked. He got a second certification through his company, something that bumped his pay grade. Kristen picked up some freelance work. They figured it out. I was not surprised. People tend to find the money when the option of not finding it disappears. He asked me in February if I would consider resuming the monthly payments. He was careful about how he phrased it. He said he understood if I did not want to. He said things had been hard and he did not want to make them worse. He said Kristen was open to having a real conversation about boundaries and family time going forward. I told him I appreciated that. I said I would think about it. I have been thinking about it. Here is where I am now. I do not regret what I did. I want to be clear about that, not because I am proud of it, exactly, but because I believe it was the only language available to me at that point. My son is a good man who had slowly, without realizing it, allowed someone else's comfort to become more important than his father's dignity. That happens in marriages. I understand it. But understanding it does not mean absorbing it without response. What I will say is this. My daughter-in-law called me in late January, not to talk about money. She called to apologize. Not a big, dramatic apology. A quiet one. She said she had not thought about how the Christmas decision would feel from where I was standing. She said she had been focused on what she wanted without thinking about what it cost me. She said she was sorry. It was the first time she had ever apologized to me for anything. I told her I appreciated the call, and I meant it. We had lunch, the three of us, in February, at a diner near their house. We did not solve everything. We are not a television family. But we talked. Kristen said she wanted me to be part of things. She did not say it easily, and I could tell she meant it. My son looked relieved in the way you look when you have been holding something heavy for a long time and someone finally agrees to help carry it. I have not restarted the monthly payments. That, I think, is finished. It was always the wrong arrangement, not because of the money, but because of what it quietly said about the dynamic between us. I will help my son in other ways. I will show up, I will be present, but I will not fund a life where I am optional. That is not helping. That is something else. Next Christmas, I will be at the table. That was not a negotiation. That was simply a fact my son stated one afternoon in February while we were eating pie at that diner, and I nodded and did not make a big deal of it, and we talked about other things. I am 63 years old. My son is my son. Whatever happens between now and whenever I run out of time, that does not change. But I am not a wallet, and I am not invisible. I got back in my car, and I drove home. And that was enough for one day. There is a moment in every father's life when he realizes that being needed and being valued are not the same thing. I lived inside that confusion for years. I wrote checks, I showed up, I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. And I told myself that was love. Maybe some of it was, but some of it, if I am being honest, was fear. Fear that if I stopped giving, I would stop mattering. What I learned from all of this is something I wish I had understood earlier. Not a rule, not a lesson from a book. Just a plain fact about how life tends to work. The way you allow people to treat you becomes the way they treat you. Not because they are cruel, necessarily, but because people, even the ones who love you, will fill whatever space you give them. I gave my son and his wife a space where my presence was optional and my money was expected. I built that arrangement slowly, one transferred dollar at a time, one swallowed comment at a time. I cannot put all of that on Kristen. I have to own my part. The right thing to do, the decent thing, the thing that actually respected both of us, was to stop pretending the arrangement was healthy. That took more courage than I expected. There is nothing easy about sitting across from your son, the boy you raised alone, and telling him the money is gone. My hands were steady, but my chest was not. I had to keep reminding myself that protecting my own dignity was not the same as abandoning him. He was a grown man. He could figure it out. And he did. What I also had to reckon with was this. I had not been thinking clearly for a long time. I kept choosing peace over honesty, and I called that wisdom. It was not wisdom. It was avoidance. Real clear-headedness would have looked like a hard conversation 3 years earlier, before the patterns set, before Kristen's parents became the center of every holiday, and I became the man who mailed a check every first of the month. I should have seen where things were heading. I chose not to. That is on me. But here is what I also know. When I finally did act, when I stopped the transfer and sat with the discomfort of what would follow, something shifted in me that had been stuck for a long time. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I chose myself. And the strange thing about that is, it did not push my son away permanently. It pushed him toward a real conversation. Kristen called me in January not because I guilted her, but because the consequence of her actions became real. People grow when reality arrives. I had been buffering reality for years. I am not a perfect father. I made mistakes raising my son, and I made mistakes in how I handled his marriage. But I did not quit. I did not disappear. I sat at that diner in February and ordered pie and talked about the future like it still belonged to both of us. That, I think, is the only thing worth carrying forward, not the anger, not the score, just the willingness to stay in the room, be honest about what you need, and trust that love, real love, not the transactional kind, can survive a hard winter if both people are willing to come back to the table. I got back in my car and drove home. The road was the same as it always was. I just finally knew where I was going.